by the UN member states in 2015 provides a shared blueprint for peace and prosperity for people and the planet, now and into the future. At its heart are the 17 SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, that are an urgent call for action in global partnership. Microloans help millions of families start and expand businesses, buy essentials, and support their children's education. They directly contribute to at least 7 of the 17 SDGs: no poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being, quality education, gender equality, decent work and economic growth, reduced inequalities. Indirectly, there could be a way wider impact. That is what we'll take up in our discussion today with this eminent panel here. They comprise top industry experts from organizations that are partners in the quest for SDGs through microfinance. So I'll open the house. We have an eminent panel here. I'll start with you, Royston. Royston is the CEO of, Royston Braganza is the CEO of Grameen Capital India. Royston, the success story of Grameen is celebrated globally. Studying its impact, which of the SDGs do you think its efforts have taken forward? Also, is the microfinance sector geared up to take on the challenges on the way?
Thanks for that kind introduction. I think what we are seeing today is probably where microfinance was 15 years ago. If you look at microfinance 15 years ago, you saw a huge opportunity, you saw a shortage of funding, people waiting on the sidelines, wondering what would be the next big evolution, the next big idea. And you found very few key policy levers that made all the difference. We talked about it this morning. We talked about RBI bringing in priority sector lending to include microfinance. You talked about a new MFI and NBFC category. You talked about the ECB being opened up for the NBFC MFIs. And suddenly we saw a huge amount of funding that rushed into microfinance. We're sitting today and looking at globally a $30 trillion shortfall in financing the SDGs. Probably 6 to 7 trillion of that is India's need for the SDG financing. This morning, Shri Sinha talked about that need for the trillions to flow into funding in the Indian context. And unless we are able to again identify what are those levers, what are those points that we could really accelerate, and no need to reinvent the wheel, because microfinance has already created a very strong platform to be able to bring that funding in. Of course, the tragedy is that 6 weeks ago, the UN General Assembly Secretary General said that we need to save the SDGs. So globally, there is a big problem. We are exactly midway through the 2030 agenda. It was launched in 2015, so we're 7.5 years into that. And we are nowhere near it. Of course, COVID created its own havoc, but we still need a lot to do in addition to just recovering from COVID. So what is really going to accelerate is if we are able to not reinvent the wheel, build on existing platforms that we have, and finally see how do we bring new pools of capital in. And I'll sort of keep this answer short so we can have a conversation and keep it free-flowing. So I won't answer all 3 questions in one shot and put people to sleep, because post-lunch is always the graveyard shift. But maybe in another round I'll come back to the question number 2 and 3. But let me give you one quick thing that we have done. We are seeing the need for funding that is there globally. Grameen shot to fame in 2006 when Professor Yunus won the Nobel Peace Prize for microcredit. We're saying, can we do micro bonds that are SDG focused? And so 4 years ago, we created an entity called Grameen Impact. We did the world's first SDG 5 bond on women's empowerment. We did the world's first SDG 8 bond on livelihoods and skilling. We did the follow-on bond with women and entrepreneurship. We then did a Gold 2 bond with food security and agri. We then did a Gold 7 bond on clean energy. So the ability for us to create new pools of funding, I think is what is most exciting. how do we overlay the existing microfinance outreach, 60 million households, and say, can we provide them funding for solar units? How does that contribute to Goal 7? Can we provide them funding for creating new jobs? How does that contribute to Goal 8? So build on the existing platform, create new pools of capital, measure the impact that is getting done, and finally distribute these pools and create new pools of capital. So distribute it to new investors, get crowding in of capital, bring banks like Sonali, bring private equity investors, bring private wealth investors, bring multilateral agencies, all blended together in a single micro bond. So I think Grameen Impact's focus is purely the SDG financing, and I think microfinance provides us the right platform to be able to bring in new pools of capital.
I'd like to go to Dr. Aqueel, who's the MD of Mitrata Inclusive Financial Services. Dr. Aqueel.
I represent a microfinance institution, and I would say that we can't take it for granted that we can work on it. We need to nurture ourselves, and I think there are a couple of issues. First is, do we really believe in it? And when we say believe, not by philosophy or by verbal presentations, right from the board to the last staff of the institution has to strongly believe into it, has to be aligned. So we need to grow as an institution. It doesn't give us a right that since we work on priority sector lending and we work in villages, we can claim that we work on SDGs. We need to gear up, we have to nurture ourselves. I think secondly, the ecosystem has to be created. You just mentioned about the renewable and the solar, and 12 o'clock we had a session with GIZ and Sustain Plus. And what a miss. They did a pilot where there was no microfinance institution. Now they are looking for a microfinance institution to go and finance the solar pump, whereas the whole process has been completed. So all the stakeholders coming together and working is often a story we have that we miss it out. So I think just to keep it short and allow other panelists to contribute, I think as microfinance institution, we need to have a strong conviction, belief and accountability towards SDG, and for that we have to gear up as an institution. We need to build our capacities, and that ecosystem has to be enabler to support the same by way of either the bonds or the funding or the technical assistance supports. Then only I think we can make it. And of course, we have to be accountable by way of measuring it, and that has to be tech-based rather than just the qualitative. So I think that is something I'll talk about later. Thank you.
Yeah, Dr. Aqueel, so you did say that, in our conversation just earlier, that actually microfinance is not naturally suited towards helping achieve SDGs. Hi, I'm audible, I'm sorry. So, yeah, we just discussed how, microfinance institutions are not exactly naturally suited, a natural fit to achieve SDGs. They have to work towards it. You just mentioned, the factors that have to be kept in mind and the enabling factors, basically. Thank you for that. And I'd like to move to Urvashi Prasad, who's the Director in the Development Monitoring and Evaluation Office at the NITI Aayog. Urvashi brings extensive experience in health, nutrition, sanitation, gender, and public policy. So here's a question for you, Urvashi. You're an expert in this field. So as someone who's been there in public policy related to the social sector, can you tell us how effective microfinance has been with regard to SDG 8 that pertains to decent work and economic growth, especially if you were to link it to SDG 3, that's good health and well-being? Broad picture.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So I think like we sort of discussed that microfinance, one is the direct impact that it has, and that is the credit you provide, and it can be, as we said, it could be for many other purposes as well. In fact, we started with plain vanilla microfinance, and then we sort of went on to credit for water sanitation, and an area I've worked in myself, and housing and vocational training and so on, and so we anyway broadened that base quite a bit, and of course there's a lot more that we can do, which can help us to achieve the SDGs by adding on to this. But I think the other is really the platform, as Royston was saying, the power of the platform. And I think when I look at it from a government or a public policy point of view, there is so much that we can do by leveraging the microfinance networks. And the fact that women are an overwhelming part of it sort of just makes it an even more important avenue. Because any intervention that we try to implement, which pertains to gender or water sanitation or health or education, we're always looking for these community networks. And microfinance naturally lends itself to that. There is an organization that is inherent to the microfinance space. There's a community bonding, there's networks that we see there, which we can actually leverage for many other interventions, both public and private. So I think that is what we need to do, is aside from the direct interventions that we do through microfinance and the direct impact of that on SDGs, how do we leverage that platform for various other interventions that we implement and make microfinance a critical integral part of that. I think that thinking we need to perhaps do more of in order to really move closer towards some of the SDGs.
Thank you, Urvashi. I have from health, sanitation, and one issue that automatically crops up is water. We have with us Manoj Gulati, who is the Regional Director, South Asia, Water.org. And so I'll come to your niche expertise, Manoj. SDG 6, that's clean water and sanitation. How does this one goal help achieve many other goals?
Thank you so much. It's an interesting question that how does SDG 6, which is safe water and sanitation, directly impact other goals. So I'll try to explain that, and also explain from a point of climate perspective what's happening in it. So it's water is a double whammy in some ways. So if you look at SDG 6, it's a pivotal factor. Solving SDG 6 allows you children, 130 million girls do not go to school after adolescence. Once they hit puberty, they do not go to schools because they do not have safe sanitation available. That's straight away hitting our SDG 3, I guess, which is education. If you look at it from or SDG 4, which is education, if you look at it from a health perspective, every 2 minutes a child dies. And that child is dying because there's lack of clean water, because of diarrhea. If you look at it from a gender equality, women in India spend there's a data says over 40% of the women will travel more than an hour every day, 2 times a day. That means 15 minutes minimum to collect water. And I know that we're doing a lot of work from the government perspective, but that data is more than alarming at this stage and needs to be solved. And there is a fact that the woman actually, there's a data which says that 100 crore rupees is lost every year because of women not being able to take up meaningful jobs because of their collecting water. So SDG 3, SDG 4, SDG 8, climate, directly SDG 13, it directly affects it. There's actually a very nice quote which says that if climate is the shark that we all are faced with, then water is the teeth of that shark. It's as difficult. If you do not solve water problem, you will have all the other problems linked to it. The good thing which is happening is that I feel that when I sit at this dais, that the MFI sector is so well poised for further solving SDG 6, and in that effect also solving the other SDGs. Many of you would say that, can water and sanitation be treated as a financial product? And I'm always amazed to see how many women actually want to say this as one of their solutions, the enablement to it, versus the dependency on government and the dependency on charity. I'm happy to say that many of the larger institutions in India have taken that opportunity. Whether, today we have got over 4.1 million loans have happened. Over 7,000 crores of lending has happened. And the beauty is in the data, in some ways it is 99% repayment rate. And that makes it really powerful as a financial product. It becomes really powerful as a solution that we can offer to our clients and as a way to change their lives. And I find that this product is one which actually allows the woman to feel empowered because they actually were able to solve their own problem through a microloan. I think there's a lot to cover it. I'll pause at this stage and come back for more information.
I'll next request Sonali Shahpurwala. She's the head of inclusive banking at HSBC, and an industry veteran with over 2.5 decades of experience with top domestic and international banks across verticals. Sonali, for a multinational organization like yours, how big a challenge is penetration into the remotest geographies and the poorest sections? And how would a lender in these areas ensure economic viability and efficient end use of the funds?
Thanks for that, Ranjana. And I think that veterans sitting here, so I'm literally the building in terms of my knowledge. Sorry, can you hear me now? So I'll just tell you from a multinational perspective, I would say that yes, we do not have the reach. We do not have the network. We don't have the doorstep delivery. We do have credit challenges. We do have limited risk appetite. So all this, of course, has played into how a multinational is able to grow into this, into this finance. However, having said this, I'm actually very proud to be part of HSBC because of the kind of penetration that we have made. You think a foreign bank like us would sort of be really at the 30,000 level. But having said that, let me tell you that we are today banking the top 20 MFIs in the country. We have a sizable portfolio. We are earmarked funds. Sustainability is right now a key word in HSBC, and we are doing a lot. So we have, still? Can you? Okay, sorry. So we have a two-pronged approach, and one, of course, by being able to deploy pools of capital to the sector and also help them access new pools of capital. We've just recently raised a ECB for credit Grameen, working with a lot of the DFIs to get guarantee structure. So we are trying to get new pools of capital. The other approach that we have taken is in terms of our sustainability. We've actually doing a lot on the sustainability side. So we're actually helping women farmers, being able to bring down their agricultural costs, helping them access organic inputs and helping them increase their household incomes. We've also tied up with women weavers. We are again helping them design and develop designs, training them, and then we're also helping them augment their income. We're also helping the circular economy, where we are actually helping these low-income households which are generating waste. We are helping them recycle this and reuse this. So we are there in many parts of these areas, and HSBC is very, very committed to this area. We not only think it's sustainable, but it's commercially viable for banks like us. So we are clearly focused on this segment because we truly believe that the next 20 years belongs to the end borrower, and we as a bank will have to find ways to get to that end borrower, whether it's through technological evolution, whether it's through partnering with our MFI network, but we definitely know that here's where the growth is.
Thank you, Sonali. So, yes, this would be a lot about partnerships with local institutions. That's how you reach the Yeah. So, I'd like to pose a question to Hemang Mehta, who's the Group Head Risk at Chennai-based Vivriti Group. Hi, Hemang. Yes, we've heard of very robust recoveries in microfinance, and with much of the dynamics having played out due to social conditioning, collective responsibility. How important is digital tracking in the process? And I'm curious about the innovations that an organization like yours would have taken out to achieve success.
Thank you. So, Vivriti is not a direct MFI lender. We partner with various MFIs for a final disbursement to the end borrower. So, at present, we have close to 40 microfinance clients who are in turn dispersing to the end borrowers. Now, digitization has come into the sector in a big way. So, it starts right at the selection of the branch. Which state do you want the new branch to open up? Which district, which pin code? So, with the advent of specific bureau data, where we can identify cohorts and pin codes, where there is a large number of borrowers who are not overbanked, and the selection starts from there. So, digitization starts from there. We have also seen a huge digitization at each and every microfinance client. So, some of our microfinance clients, they have set up their own app, and that app is in the hands of every field officer. So every women's group, tagging is there on the app. What is the expected collections? What is the actual recoveries at a field officer, at the branch level, and also at the HO level. So real-time data is going through the system, and which is available to everybody within the microfinance company. So yes, there has been a huge digitization at every level. Even in our company, we are not tracking the end borrower right now. But the impact that we see is through the MFIs that are on lending. So if you look at the data that we collect in terms of what is the amount of loans that we have disbursed and how many end women borrowers have been targeted and touched, the quality of that data has improved substantially over time, and that is thanks to digitization.
Thank you, Hemang. So when we talk about the small borrower, I would like to ask something, Dr. Aqueel. So I guess a key enabling component for successful microfinance stories is about skilling, upskilling, and providing market linkages. How does this work for organizations such as yours?
I think that's a very important point, because now everybody is talking of not of supply chain but of value chain. We have to convert, and it's very important that end-to-end things are available. Also, I think in terms of the product diversification, it's very, very important. Particularly if we talk of SDG on health, for example, a lot needs to be done where the good quality health services need to reach to the doorstep of the ultra-poor. Mitrata works in remote rural areas. We are a deep-rooted rural-based MFI, and one of the studies we did in PR in the villages was 40 to 60,000 rupees annually was being spent only on consultation, only, that too not from a qualified doctor. So how do we make access to quality health services at the doorsteps? And for that, again, microfinance is a means, not an end. So we need partners, and you mentioned about partnership. So I think it's very, very important that we talk about a value chain where all the key stakeholders come together. It is seamlessly built in. And we, since are reaching to the last milestone, MFI is the only advantage we have, or the biggest advantage I would say we have is we are at the doorsteps. And we have very close bond, relationship and trust, which we cannot betray of our communities and clients. So we need to make sure that we don't push anything on them. We don't have top-down approach, we need to have bottom-up approach. We need to do the assessments of their need, and we take quality assured services to them. It's not about selling. Gone those days, of course, clients also have, and our borrowers have got very educated. But I think it's unethical as well as our accountability that we need to be driven by our customers, and customers are our women beneficiaries and the family and the household. So the value chain becomes very, very important rather than just the supply chain. So that differentiation needs to be established.
This is about, when we talk about this sector and the impact, what comes to mind all the time is data. So, a question to you, Manoj. This year's SDG goals report shows that we lack timely, high-quality data to fully understand where we are and where we are headed. So, is there sufficient level of documentation and dissemination
Session?
So this is an interesting question. I think part of it, Urvashi, will be able to also cover from your perspective, so we go from me to you. I think that is one major issue that we live with. When you look at the SDG data, we're not tracking there. Part of it is that we do not have robust tracking systems, and we need to reassess how to do it. I'll give an example. For instance, we are today sitting at Sa-Dhan. A lot of us are coming from the microfinance background. And a lot has been done in the microfinance sector. Whether it is, lending for, and I'll just give a simple example is lending for cycles, lending for education, lending for health. These are things that we have picked up from time to time to serve our clients. But when we do our MIS mapping, we do not map it accurately, or we do not take enough effort to convert it into SDG mappings. If we were converting our own work, even today, into SDG mappings, we would have a much better sense of how we are contributing to the success. Second, there's one, and Royston and I often talk about this, that there is the total demand for, I go back to WASH, to Water and Sanitation SDG 6, as per the World Bank study, every year it requires globally it requires $118 billion. $118 billion is required, and if I take the global, all the data that is there, the government spending, the charity CSR spending, is around $28 billion. So in fact, and this is just one SDG. In fact, the number one reason why we may not reach our goals is because of the lack of financial accessibility at the end of the story. So we need to track every cent, every rupee that we are spending to make sure that we are actually showing through an alternative financing mechanism we are meeting those SDG goals. Third thing I just want to briefly touch upon is why is it attractive to track this data? When you start tracking this data, you actually are making a stronger case that India is more investable with respect to SDG. The ESG funds, the impact funds, the climate funds, everybody globally starts saying, wow, these guys are actually their financial institutions got better tracking mechanisms. We want to invest and get our impact, what they have to create impact in a country where it's easily quantifiable and measurable. And that's why it's very important that the MFIs today, while you're doing it, you start actually accounting for it. Urvashi, over to you.
So I think, data, it is a huge challenge, and I think one is within, the government system itself. It's a big issue because there's a lot of fragmented data systems that we have. That sort of interoperability and being able to trace, one person through the system, because, one person is getting multiple services, and that's something that, we are not really able to trace accurately. So that is one part of the problem that we're trying to address, that, there should be some way to, uniquely identify an individual, at least through our different, systems that we have for different programs. But the other bigger issue is how do we integrate data sets between the public and the private sectors. And because, SDGs, given it's such a huge agenda, as we know, it's not just the government, which is working towards it. It's the private sector, it's civil society. So there's data which is coming in and flowing in from so many different sources. And how do we integrate that? Health is one sector which I'm more familiar with, and there I see that there's so much of our data which actually lies in the private sector. Because, people overwhelmingly go to the private sector for, various kinds of health services. So how do we actually have that exchange of data and then be able to aggregate it and use it meaningfully? I think that is really our biggest challenge, but we are trying to take some steps in this direction. We are also trying to build a data analytics platform which is focused on how to make better use of the data we already have. Because, in a lot of cases we have the data sets, But like, was being said, that we're not necessarily mapping it correctly, or we're not necessarily using it or analyzing it correctly. So that's another big piece of, what we're trying to do. So I think it's interoperability, cleaning up those data sets, public-private exchange, as well as better analytics. How do we get more out of the data we're collecting? So I think all those dimensions, we need to do a lot of work on.
Thank you, Urvashi. That brought a big point, how everything needs to converge, how analytics will play a big role in dissemination on use of data, and how, like Manoj said, that India will be, more investor friendly, more attractive to investments once we have the data in place. Thank you for the perspectives on that. I'll be going back to Royston. So, in 2018, Royston, you addressed an event at the 73rd session of the General Assembly on SDGs. What was the key takeaway? And have we also, this was 2018, so what's the progress further to that?
So I just want to first say I'm a bit uneasy with the conversation so far. We are approaching all of this from our perspective. I think there are many MFIs in the room. How many MFIs, representing MFIs, people in an MFI in the audience? Okay, thank you. Their biggest challenge is, how do I get more funding? How do I get cheaper funding? Unless we are able to say, and this links to what we talked at the UN General Assembly, $30 trillion is the gap. India probably needs, and Urvashi may be better placed from NITI Aayog to say what is that number, is it 5 trillion or 8 trillion, which is the India gap for the SDGs. That money needs to come in to do something at the bottom of the pyramid. I call it the ESG pyramid, and SDG is the platform or the foundation of that ESG pyramid. If we don't get the SDGs in order, the ESGs will collapse. Globally, everyone is approaching it from the ESG side. $1 billion fund, $5 billion fund, $1 trillion fund for ESGs. Pension funds flowing into ESGs. But the base of that ESG pyramid is the SDG. We are already present as a microfinance sector at that base. How do I get Aqueel cheaper cost of funding? How does Aqueel's borrowers and the other MFIs who put their hands up today say, because of what you are already doing, you will get zero coupon debt? Is anyone, then there would have been, this would have been the biggest panel, we would have had to have Pragati Maidan to have this conference. Because that's what we need. This sector needs to be able to access zero coupon debt. The women who are serving and being served at the bottom of the pyramid are doing a service to India. India should be saying, I will pay for your interest rate because you are able to move from a chula and taking wood from the forest into putting a solar cooker. But we are all sitting here and trying to say how we can tweak our own world. The world needs us. We don't need the world right now. If we are able to position what we are doing at the bottom of the pyramid, I would say, if NITI Aayog says, or whoever says, this is a 500 crore fund, I am happy to run it as Grameen Impact and provide outcome funding based debt to all the MFIs in this room and say that your cost will be reduced to the extent of impact that you generate. So someone like 60 decibels sitting in the room who is measuring impact, I can bring them on board or they can come on board and measure that impact, and if it qualifies, then their cost of debt instead of 14 becomes 7 or 3 or 0 depending on how much of water table improvement they have shown, farm productivity increase, solar decarbonization they have shown, and then Sonali can distribute these bonds to her private wealth and based on her reach as a multinational bank to global investors. So we have to approach this differently. We are able to save, we are able to solve India's problems. We are not going with a begging bowl saying, give me funding, see what good I'm doing. It should be the other way around saying, if you don't support me, you are doomed. And so how do we as an MFI, thank you for the one man clapping for me. Really, how do we approach the government and say, you need us. Why do you want to build an alternative and reinvent the wheel when if every single loan that is given for solar units can be free? Because the carbon offset is actually the one that through a carbon trading mechanism is paying for the coupon. Or the loans for the toilet or the loans for the water source are free or farm ponds are free because the water table improvement Coca-Cola Foundation is paying for that. So there has to be a more creative, innovative approach. Like I said, post lunch, if we had the dessert counter here, we would have started on time. So we need to be able to be creative in the way we are approaching problems. It's not our problem. If it is our problem, then we will have a side room and discuss it, and after the end we'll all get exhausted and go back. We are the solution provider to the nation. We are the solution provider to the world. If we as Sa-Dhan, and I'm on the board and I was the chair of Sa-Dhan earlier, have 60 million households through our members, then imagine if 60 million households now have solar, now have a toilet facility, now have a livelihood generating opportunity, now have something for goal 2 on food security, something for goal 3 on health, or goal 5 on women's empowerment, goal 6 on water and sanitation, goal 7 on clean energy. I can go on showing off that I know them by heart. But the fact is, the funding has to come and say we are here. So, the challenges to people at this conference is to start reclassifying the dialogue, the narrative. We are here to support India's development. How do people like NITI Aayog partner with us? How does HSBC and other banks partner with us to bring low-cost debt to the women entrepreneur so that they can do more of what they are doing? How can impact evaluation and outcome finance drive the way forward? So in this doom and gloom, the RBI governor, I was having breakfast with him last week, talked about a triple black swan event. He says we've had COVID, then we've had Ukraine, and now we have a fuel crisis, energy crisis, inflation, all of that. What is the hope? 4 things, HOPE. Aqueel talked about a holistic ecosystem approach. O is, I talked about the outcome approach. Urvashi talked about a policy level change that's needed. And Manoj talked about everyone has to be part of this. So HOPE is the way forward. So I'm hopeful.
That was a very thank you, panelists, for the very enriching perspectives. I'd like to open the floor to questions from people who are in the sector, who are interested in the sector. So we'd like to have some questions for our panelists, please. I hope we didn't put you to sleep. Yes, please. Please introduce yourself.
Small Finance Bank has lost his car keys. It was there in the introductory session, so he must have put it in a bag, and that bag is missing. So all of you are kindly requested to check your bags, please. It's a car keys.
I hope I can ask.
Yes, please.
Hi,
Please
this
introduce
is
yourself.
Ashlesh. I am from Kotak Institutional Equities. My question is on the individual loans business, and specifically, since we are talking about SDGs, on the sustainability of that business within MFI. So the question is that we are seeing quite a few lenders moving, doing the individual loans business along with the JLG model. So how do you look at the outlook for this business in terms of what can possibly be a challenge, what can go wrong, and what should MFI lenders do to mitigate those risks?
I don't know if this question is related to SDGs because you are talking about the risk related to individual lending. Vivriti is here. So I think I won't go into that aspect with the discussion on SDG, but definitely there is a lot of opportunities. But as very rightly said by my friend, that while doing day-to-day business, the priority is something else than SDG. So identifying the enterprises and giving them some affirmative, positive in terms of either rate of interest or certain subvention will be very helpful in promoting enterprises which are directly contributing to SDG. But that facilities are not available, that kind of funds are not available. So if those kinds of funds are available, then definitely as MFIs we have the opportunity to identify, do the due diligence, do the underwriting, and give them the money and promote such enterprises which are not only financially viable and sustainable but also contributing towards the SDG agenda.
Thank you.
I just want to add to that, the first step is that as MFIs, we need to believe that these products, the SDG products, have a value for us and for our clients. And I think that's where the first step itself doesn't happen. The collecting the data that we earlier talked about and being able to, I'll give you another one back from the water sanitation space. Water and sanitation, traditionally we say, oh, these are income generating loans and these are consumption loans. In fact, water and sanitation, and I'm sure it will stand also for many of the other SDGs, are income enabling loans. Just this nomenclature shift, which has not happened or which needs to happen, and the organizations have done it in their mind, but technically we need to see income enabling loans. If you take a loan for education, if you take a loan for water, you actually are changing your lifestyle and your family's life. And you're changing the income parity, the ability to pay. And that's what is important. I'll give you another sense about this. Water and sanitation in India is just about reached. It's $1 billion product with 99% repayment rate. Think about it. $1 billion asset classification at 99% repayment rate, reaching over 95% of the women in rural households. If you have a fantastic product, and I'm sure the other products are similar, when you educate your client at the power of these products, you will be able to actually convert this into better financial products for yourself, for your organizations, and not just treat it as something, oh, I need to do for the sake of looking social. Actually, they're very good financial products.
I was hearing Udaya from Grameen, Udaya Heather from Grameen, the other one was SDGs, and he was mentioning that he's creating 40 lakh CFOs. That's what he calls his borrowers. They are managing, they are raising funds, they are managing the funds, they are repaying these funds. Okay? And it's becoming a virtuous cycle because as they do better, then they are seeking housing loans, renovation loans, education loans, and they're actually graduating from being microcredit into retail lending. And clearly we can see this journey that is taking place. And I don't think we say it enough, but what the MFIs are doing is so inspiring, and many of us are seeing this journey and we definitely contribute.
Not a query, but a suggestion to the point Grameen impact person said. For the products, for the funding to happen to MFIs aligned with SDG, maybe the impact agencies along with agencies like yours may work with MFIs in Sa-Dhan to create products. That product be shared with us also and others also for specific funding for those lines. That, if that is done, probably more to
No, that's absolutely. So the whole concept around Grameen Impact's SDG Impact Bond is exactly that. Let's say we raise 50 crores for a clean energy bond. Then we give that, say, 10 crores each to 5 MFIs for on-lending for solar units. And then the outcomes in terms of carbon reduction get sold and traded and becomes it's like a refinance. It becomes an interest subvention for that loan. The same thing can be done for toilets and for water, and that people like Manoj and his contacts and his networks with recommenders and others, that becomes an outcome funding for that loan. Or we do one with, say, women's farmers, and then we work with, say, Walmart Foundation or Syngenta or Nestle, and that becomes the... So the ability for us to monetize impact, I think, is the key. And that product is what we are now pioneered globally called the SDG Impact Box.
I think very rightly said, Mitrata is discussing with IP Global, which is being supported by USAID, where we are developing the health products for women particularly at the village level, where they have both the interest subvention facility as well as the FLDG facility available. So as MFI, that's encouraging Mitrata to start doing interventions on the health products, because the support is available both in terms of cheaper loan going to the women beneficiaries, as well as the risk associated with these new products, where we have to establish these products in the market. The FLDG component is there. So, but I was not even aware about it as an MFI until I met somebody in a conference and came to know about it. So the information is also missing in terms of where are these products, where are these funds, and how do they operate. And we as MFIs can't reach out to even mobilize these funds. Basically.
So good. That's what basically how to institutionalize that, how to mainstream that instead of having bilates. Instead of having bilate agreement and engagement, that would have a limitation of scale.
Yeah,
so which way we mainstream that is what we should be focusing on.
Yeah, thank you for that. Probably we are talking about a platform kind of a thing, where we share the pool.
Sa-Dhan is a platform.
So shared vision, shared.
We raised a 500 crore fund in Sa-Dhan for its member MFIs, and that could be given for SDGs.
1, 2, all the banks are lending to MFIs. If MFIs come, apart from our general vanilla type of lending we would be doing to micro borrowers, we have these products also aligned to SDGs. If you give something cheaper, for example, from our side, we have started speaking to MFIs that if you ultimate lending rates go down.
Could you introduce yourself?
I am Arun Kumar, CGM Shilpi. So we have started telling MFIs that if you reduce your rates for ultimate borrower, we'll also do the reduction, commensurate reduction. So this is just one. But then SDG aligned products, if all the MFIs start discussing with their lenders, their bankers, investors, that these are the products, apart from general line, you give some special concessional fund, probably that will happen.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Yes. This would be the last question, I'm sorry. Yes.
Thank you. My name is Tripti Singh. I work for an impact measurement organization called 60 Decibels. Thank you to Royston for the shout out. It is more of a comment. I think at Sa-Dhan in general, and sort of this particular conference or this particular panel in specific, we have all the stakeholders who are an invested interest in the MFI space, except for the actual borrowers. Their voices are not being heard here, and very often the data that we've been talking about and kind of the data that is important to make decisions that truly impact their lives is missing. And so I'm just curious to understand how we are going to be thinking about including those voices in the decision-making process. So, for example, we spoke about all the data, number of women reached, number of sort of rural areas penetrated because of the focus on inclusion. Yet, how are those lives actually changing? So take a woman's life, she got a loan at a good interest rate, and we hypothesize that, this is making her life as well as her sort of family's lives better. But unless you speak to her, unless you actually get data from the horse's mouth, you're not actually going to know if that data is going all the way as sort of hypothesized and assumed. And so, more of a request to the sector than anything else, listen to the voices that actually matter, listen to the voices whose lives are supposed to be impacted by everything that we're doing here.
That's a great one, and it's more of a very deep comment on what we are getting to. You'd like to speak?
We just recently completed a study, means we were part of that study, Voices of the Customer, and 100% women respondent, independently done using the IVR facilities and reaching out to the households and getting the voices from the source in terms of the benefits and impact, and have candid feedback from them about Mitrata and other, I think it was global study, and from India Mitrata was included. Very, very good output came out of the study, and there was criticism as well as appreciation. So I think the need is that who should be the front face of our initiative. It has to be our, I don't use the word borrowers or your clients, I say customers, because we are serving them, they have a right, they need to rule, we need to listen to them, and we need to be guided by them. And time gone that where we used to impose things on them, we need to understand their need and adapt ourselves, and challenge is for us to customize ourselves to serve to their agenda. And that has to be now, has to be digitally enabled. You can't go and do surveys, paper surveys, compile and put the report. Recently we did that. Actually it was done by Tokyo and we were part of it, and it was a global study. But I know we have been talking to Decibel also. Opportunity is talking about. So there are initiatives coming in, but need is to mainstream it. It has to be institutionalized. I like what Arupsa said, that until unless mainstream and institutionalization and it becomes part of the core business, where the funds are available, the tech is available, the enabling environment is available, and it is an integrated holistic approach supported by impact assessment and the verifiable numbers. I think it will continue to remain fragmented, and this is the need of the hour. It should be done yesterday, not tomorrow.
Yet to reveal the secret. And now I'll request Mr. Royston Braganza to share the other gifts to our other panelists. Mr. Braganza is also in the Sa-Dhan panel, board. Yes. Mr. Hemang Mehta, Group Head Risk, Vivriti Group. Please. Mr. Manoj, Gulati, Regional Director, South Asia, Water.org. Ms. Ranjana, Chauhan, News Editor, Informist, Media Private Limited. Ms. Sonali, Shahpurwala, Head Inclusive Banking, HSBC. And Ms. Urvashi Prasad, Director, DMEO, NITI Aayog. Thank you all. Thank you so much for your valuable time. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Dr. Aqueel Ahmad Khan, MD, Mitrata, Inclusive Financial Services Private Limited. Yes, yes, yes. Please carry your bags. The setup will be changed now.
And going on to become programs. More than 60% of total health expenditure are out-of-pocket expenses. And enforce the mandatory addresses and
sometimes I could come to cost.
thus our vision.
And that money is modified. And it is